Welcome to the APMM Virtual Conference 2021. We'd like to take a minute to highlight a feature not present here at the 2021 Virtual Conference that is a staple of our in-person conferences, the Art Headland Student Model Competition. Once the 2020 edition in Seattle was postponed, we knew the current group of graduates and upper-level model students would have no opportunity to show off their skills and compete for prizes. So in a show of solidarity, the APMM and our VP of Education organized an online student model making competition to take place via Instagram and allow any student in an accredited program to enter their models for a chance to win cash prizes and a complimentary APMM membership. The response was overwhelming and assured us that this would become a new tradition in tandem with the in-person competition at the physical conferences. The second annual virtual student model making competition is on its way soon. In the meantime, you can take a look at the recap of the first incredibly successful edition. In today's session, we go inside a world of miniature magic and expert craftsmanship as we get a tour of the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures. Laura Taylor, the curator of interpretation at the museum, highlights some of the finest pieces of the collection and walks us through the museum while relaying its history. If you have any questions, Laura, as well as an APMM representative, will be available in the chat, and we encourage you to discuss some of your favorite objects with the other attendees. The chat will be open until the end of the hour, and after the tour is completed, we will have an open Q&A for the remainder of the time. And with that, punch it, Margaret.
The National Museum of Toys and Miniatures extends its warmest regards to the Association of Professional Model Makers. My name is Laura Taylor, and I'm the Curator of Interpretation. I'd like to take you on a tour of some of the most celebrated works of the fine-scale miniature movement in the museum's collection. But first, here's a little history about the museum and a quick tour. The National Museum of Toys and Miniatures was founded by two Kansas City natives, Mary Harris Francis and Barbara Marshall. The two women enjoyed collecting small things but were interested in different types of things. Mary Harris Francis enjoyed collecting children's toys, while Barbara Marshall was interested in the realistic details of artist-made miniatures. It was Mary Harris Francis's mother who said, "If you girls get one more thing, you're going to have to open a museum." Although this idea was offered in jest, the women realized the one thing they liked better than collecting was sharing their collections with others. They formed a nonprofit and began to look for a space to display their collections. They secured the old Terman Mansion on the Kansas City campus of the University of Missouri. The 7,500 square foot house was built in 1911, and the museum co-founders filled every nook and cranny. They eventually expanded the building to over 33,000 square feet, and in 2015, the museum was completely renovated. In the introduction space, Visitors are introduced to the two collections through a short film and examples. The first floor is devoted to fine-scale miniatures, and the second floor is devoted to toys. The miniature collection is the largest in the world and focuses on miniatures made as a part of an art movement that began in the 1970s. The toy collection is the largest in the Midwest. The oldest toy in the collection is a doll that dates to around 1750, but the collection is predominantly from the 19th and 20th centuries. This image shows the lobby with the entrance to the fine-scale miniature gallery. On the right, you can see the heart of the museum, a spinning sculpture called the Toytisserie. The Toytisserie spans 2 floors and is covered with dioramas created with toys that were donated by the community especially for this purpose. The dioramas were created by artist Sarah Lug Reagan with assistance from designer Ben Breslow. When crossing the threshold of the miniature galleries, the first exhibit explains scale. The majority of our fine-scale miniature collection is 1/12 scale. Here, miniatures are shown alongside the full scale for comparison. Another exhibit gives information about the events that inspired the fine-scale miniature movement and displays works from early artisans. The gallery includes both individual works of art as well as room settings and large architectural works. A video kiosk shows interviews with museum co-founder Barbara Marshall and explores her role as a patron of the fine-scale miniature art movement. An exhibit called In the Artist Studio also has a video kiosk that shows films of fine-scale artists turning candlesticks, cutting dovetails, creating an egg tempera painting, and shaping a charger on a pottery wheel. One side of the gallery features objects in process to show how fine-scale miniatures are made. The other side of the gallery shows the tools that fine-scale artists use. An interactive element allows visitors to practice placing the hands on a fine-scale case clock with tweezers so they can understand the precision and skill necessary for making miniatures. The fine-scale miniature galleries include a masterpiece gallery, a French gallery, a miniature maze, and a Native Peoples gallery. There are even microscopes so visitors can view micro-miniatures like a pair of dressed fleas. A giant eye watches over the second floor. It is the center of a wall-mounted zoetrope in the Optical Toys exhibit. The exhibit displays early animation and 3D toys. An introduction to the toy exhibits features comparison between toys of different time periods. A speak and spell is paired with the 19th century spelling board, and an easy bake oven is paired with a coal-burning stove. The materials and the technologies are vastly different, but the educational purpose of toys remains the same over time. The Dolls and Dollhouses wing contains two exhibits, Let's Play House and the Doll Gallery. From here you can see the museum's largest dollhouse, the Coleman House. It measures over 9 feet tall, 7 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. It was built in the 1860s for the children of a wealthy iron baron. The Let's Play House exhibit features selected children's dollhouses from the museum's collection of over 250. The exhibit explores the role of dollhouses in children's material culture from the 19th to the 20th centuries. The Doll Gallery is a space to explore the artistic attributes of dolls, from high-end French fashion dolls to those made by self-trained artists. Toys, Inc. is an exhibit that traces the development of the modern toy industry through economics and manufacturing. The exhibit begins with Germany's 19th century cottage toy industry and ends with the toy revolution that occurred with the invention of the microchip in 1971. One interactive element of the exhibit is a toy scanner that allows visitors to see inside a toy and examine its construction. Another interactive demonstrates how plastic injection molding works in a factory. The Toys from the Attic exhibit explores the importance of toys in society and culture. Personal stories of children who played with the toys are juxtaposed alongside toys from different eras. Interactive kiosks like this one about the Nettie Wells dollhouse help visitors to learn more about children and play in the past. The Game of Games challenges visitors to find the answers about vintage board games in the adjacent cases. A photo op features Letty Lane paper dolls. Now that we've taken a turn around the building, let's take an in-depth look at the fine-scale miniature collection. Barbara Marshall's love for miniatures started in childhood and grew throughout her adulthood. She was trained from an early age to appreciate and critique art by her father, and she eventually assumed a role in the family business, Hallmark. She also became a docent for the Early American Decorative Arts Collection at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. In the 1950s, Mrs. Marshall was on a business trip in New York City when she discovered the gallery of miniaturist Eric Pearson. Enchanted by Pearson's 1/12 scale miniature furniture, she purchased her first fine-scale piece, a Windsor rocker. In the 1970s, collecting and making miniatures became a popular pastime. A group of artists began to make museum-quality miniatures for a market of discerning collectors who prized realism. Barbara Marshall became a major patron of this art movement, and her collection represents the best it has to offer. Marshall often commissioned works from artists who could meet her exacting standard. She always asked the artists to create what they always dreamed of making, and she would support it. In this way, Marshall encouraged the artists to stretch their abilities, and she pushed the boundaries of the art form. Jardiniere by Linda LaRoche is a commissioned work that took the artist 14 years to complete. LaRoche chose to create a fine-scale replica of Flora Marina Flora Exotica by Emile Gallet. The Art Nouveau planter stands just 4 3/16 inches high on delicately carved cabriole legs. The plumwood casket is covered in marquetry depicting nudes, swans, and flora. Each tiny wood piece of the design fits together like a puzzle, and the interior is lined with lead from a paint tube. Louis XV's study in the Palace of Versailles is also a commissioned work. Artist Harry Smith logged 6,000 hours on the room setting that is 15 3/4 inches high. There are 2,200 pieces of wood in the parquet floor and 3,000 gilded carvings on the walls, all done by hand. Beyond the doors, a secondary space depicts the gardens of the chateau. The centerpiece of the room is the desk of the king. It is made from 36 species of wood and has a functioning roll top that conceals Louis's tiny secrets. Speaking of Louis XV, here is a portrait of his famous mistress, Madame de Pompadour, after François Boucher in 1756. The miniature painting was created by Johannes Landmann, who uses a paintbrush containing only 2 hairs from the belly of a Russian marten. Landmann does not make exact replicas, preferring instead to make changes to the color palette and facial expressions. Landmann also made one of the most intricately functioning works in the collection, a replica of a 17th century single-action Flemish harpsichord. If you were to take a toothpick and depress one of the ivory keys, the mechanism would pluck a string on the soundboard. Beneath the harpsichord lid is a painting of a musical contest between Apollo and Marsyas, rendered in vivid color and detail. The mermaid between the front legs was made from a solid piece of wood. Her crown was turned on a small lathe, and the rest of her was hand-carved. Notice how her tail splits and spirals. The soundboard inside the harpsichord includes a brass sound hole that is engraved with the portrait of a woman and Johannes Landmann's initials. Landman's paintings also appear in the Studiolo, a replica of the Studiolo Gubbio in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The full-scale room was originally commissioned by the Duke of Urbino for the Gubbio Palace in Italy in the 1470s. Barbara Marshall commissioned the miniature Studiolo for the opening of the new miniature wing of the museum in 2004. The artist was Barry Hipwell, who created the forced perspective walls out of tiny slivers of wood. Hipwell, who was English, drew artists from all over the world to assist in the creation of the room. Nick Stowe of France did the stamped tiles on the floor. Ursula Derby Skovsted of Denmark created the carved polychrome ceiling. And of course, Johannes Landmann recreated the paintings through extensive research, as some of them no longer exist. Some artists in the fine-scale miniature movement have a fine arts background, while others have no training at all. Some work in one medium, while others master several. Artist Emily Good, for example, was an applied mathematician and a physicist who also became a professional miniature artist in the 1970s. She was a skilled woodworker, metalworker, ceramicist, upholsterer, and painter. This 1/12 scale maiolica dish was modeled after an Italian dish that dates to around 1500. Ceramicist Leanne Chellis Wessel made the dish on a full-size pottery wheel and fired it in a jewelry kiln. Chellis Wessel has a fine art degree and began making miniature works for her mother's dollhouse. This turned into a full-time career in fine-scale art, which grew to include miniature egg temper paintings. Pete Acquisto was a jeweler when he made a few silver pieces for his sister to take to a miniature show. She returned with many orders, and he turned to fine-scale silversmithing full-time. His portfolio includes over 200 pieces of Georgian, Victorian, and Queen Anne silver. This wine fountain is a replica of one made by an English silversmith, Joseph Ward, around 1703. Jens Torp was also a jewelry designer when he turned to making fine-scale miniature silver and gold works in 1990. This candelabrum centerpiece is modeled after one by English silversmith Paul Storr in 1813. For their first professional fine-scale collaboration, Allison Ashby, a set designer, and her husband Steve Jedd, a cabinet maker, built the breakfast room from the William Martin House in Chicago. Ashby and Jedd reverently recreated the Frank Lloyd Wright design in stunning detail. Whereas the William Martin breakfast room is a faithful model of an actual place, Twin Manors was created as an homage to colonial Georgian architecture. Artist William R. Robertson spent 9 years researching and building a pair of idealized miniature mansions, incorporating details from historic homes from Maine to Virginia. For example, Robertson combined elements from 2 colonial mansions in Pennsylvania to create the elaborate broken pediment overmantel, which frames a painting by fine-scale artist Marjorie Adams. Robertson wanted the house to be as authentic as possible. He ground up 18th century bricks to create the miniature brickwork, and he used wood from trees that had been on the original survey of the Cherry Hill Plantation in Maryland. The kitchen includes a functioning clock jack, a mechanism that can be wound to turn the spit in the fireplace. Robertson also created one of the museum's most iconic works, the Architect's Classroom circa 1900. The turn-of-the-century room setting features a collection of functioning drafting tables and stools with working casters based on catalogs of the period. On the ceiling, the miniature sprinkler system was created from the original Grinnell patent drawings. A skylight with functioning shades allows light to filter below to the cyanotype system for copying blueprints. Each student's workstation possesses the prerequisite tools for drafting, including ornate T-squares, protractors, and toolboxes filled with individual implements. The wire wastebasket is made of 1020 soldered points. Artist Lloyd McCaffrey is widely known for his intricate ship models, and he constructed the Royal Caroline in the scale of 32 feet to 1 inch. The original yacht was launched in 1750 and broken up in 1820. The model is built with plank over solid wood. The hull is carved of holly, and all the planking and decorations are of boxwood. The rigging is made of wire. There are 3 passengers and 7 crew members on the Royal Caroline. The cannons and swivel guns at the bulwarks are turned from boxwood, and their muzzles are bored out. The Royal Caroline was extravagantly decorated, and the side friezes are painted on in high relief to imitate the original. For Lloyd McCaffrey, each piece is a study in construction. For articulation, a 1/24 scale skeleton, McCaffrey used scalpels, dental burrs, and his own handmade carving tools. The delicate rib cage was hollowed from one solid piece of wood, and the spine and pelvis are connected with mortise and tenon joints. The Art Deco jewelry store was Barbara Marshall's last commission before retiring from the museum and active acquisition in 2010. She asked English duo Kevin Mulvaney and Susie Rogers to create what they'd always dreamed of making. However, Mulvaney and Rogers turned this question around on Marshall and asked what she'd always dreamed of having for the collection. She chose a jewelry store. Mulvaney and Rogers had the challenge of creating a grand retail space within a very specific location in the museum. They constructed a 2-story room setting with rosewood paneling and 6 types of faux marble based on designs from Neiman Marcus in Chicago, the Cincinnati Netherland Hotel, and the ocean liner Normandy. The massive chandelier was strung with 15,800 beads by English artist Robert Ward. The jewelry was designed by Lori-Ann Potts of Canada using precious and semi-precious stones. Maria Jose Santos of Spain created the 3 porcelain figures, a fashionable lady, a dapper gentleman, and a store salesman. Exquisitely sculpted and beautifully dressed, the figures create a narrative for the room setting. Mulvaney and Rogers stipulated that the room be lit to look like twilight. When Maria Jose Santos learned this, she added a 5 o'clock shadow to the gentleman's cheeks. Although Barbara Marshall retired in 2010, the museum has continued to add new work to the collection, like Fernando Setien's recreation of Oswald Vermecke's Paola low board from 1959. Named after the future Queen of Belgium, the low board is a perfect representation of mid-century modern design. Here, the low board has been grouped with Girl in a Yellow Necklace after Picasso by Elie Ypma, 2 martini glasses by Jan Patry, complete with olives and stir sticks, 2 vases by John Almeida, and a rug by Emily Good. This 2-handled vase with lid was made by Mayuki Nagashima and represents a piece from the famous French porcelain factory Sèvres. The ground is a vivid lapis, the detail is 18-karat gold, and the floral design is exquisitely crisp. Conceptual knitter Althea Crome was inspired to create this cardigan by a 16th century triptych in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The gauge is 64 stitches per inch, and the sweater contains 50,000 hand-knit stitches total. Over 70 individual colors of silk thread were used to create the shading, and it took over a year to make. Tina Kreinen of the Netherlands created this replica of the sketchbook Rembrandt took on his honeymoon. Beautifully bound in leather, the silver detailing and stylus were created by Martin Niemeyer. The book is full of chalk paper, and the drawings were created by scratching into the surface with silver. Although the museum's collection reflects many high artworks, there are also those we recognize from everyday life. Jan Patry created this scrumptious guacamole making tray that includes avocados, peppers, onions, tomatoes, chips, and tortillas. Fashion is another topic that fascinates miniature artists and collectors. Patrizia Santi of Italy created the high-heeled sandals and purse with red and tan Burberry plaid. The set came complete with a shoebox and shopping bag. Peter Gable's first work to enter the museum's collection is this sailor's valentine entitled Two Hearts. Abalone veneer is the perfect backdrop for the two heart-shaped cockles in the center. The valentine incorporates natural shells, sand, and mother of pearl to create the elaborate design. T.M. Stosens gifted Mayuki Kobayashi's aquarium to the museum, and the accompanying stand was found in the collection. Kobayashi's little aquatic sculpture includes a rock archway covered in urchins and a school of yellow, blue, and orange fish. The natural world is represented by miniature artists like Beth Freeman Kane, who sculpts birds and tiny animals in nature. Here, a bird is resting on a watering can handle across from a dragonfly on the spout. The dragonfly is so tiny it is often overlooked by the naked eye. We've come to the end of our tour with one of the tiniest new acquisitions, a little field mouse by Beth Freeman Kane, measuring just 1/4 of an inch high. I hope that one of these days you'll be able to come to visit the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures. But until then, be sure to check out our website and social media. Thank you.
And now on to the Q&A. If you haven't already, head over to the chat, either to your right if you're viewing on a desktop, or below if you're on a smartphone, and join the discussion with the presenter and your fellow model makers. When you are ready, or after the session ends, you can head to the APMM Zoom meetup for further discussion or general information from an APMM representative. This Zoom meetup will be open all day from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For future sessions, head back to the conference schedule page for dates, times, and the appropriate link for each session. And as you discuss, we want to thank the companies and individuals that have supported the APMM and our conference efforts with their donations after we had to postpone our in-person conference last year. Your support means a lot to this organization, and it helped make this conference a reality. Find the names of our amazingly generous conference donors on the screen now. Thanks for coming to this session. We hope you enjoyed it.